What if I told you that everything unfolding before our eyes, the oppression in Palestine, the collapse of regimes, the cries from Al-Aqsa, the silence of global powers, is not just history in motion, but prophecy being fulfilled? This is not just another political analysis. This is a spiritual wake-up call, a deep dive into the ancient Islamic prophecies that foretold, with chilling accuracy, the events we're witnessing today and the monumental moment yet to come, the fall of Israel and the rise of Imam Mahdi. This isn't about speculation, it's about revelation. It's about revelation. In this powerful journey, you will uncover why Palestine holds the spiritual key to the world's final transformation, how injustice becomes the fuel for divine justice, and why the collapse of tyrants is not an end, but a beginning. Nah, and a beginning. Stay with us till the very end, because what you're about to hear could shift not just your understanding of world events, but your place in them. The signs are here, the time is near, and the truth is calling, is talent. Islamic eschatology speaks of a time when oppression in Palestine will reach its peak, prompting divine intervention and signaling the approaching appearance of Imam Mahdi. Throughout Islamic eschatology, the plight of Palestine occupies a central and symbolic place in the broader narrative of end times. The condition of the Holy Land, especially the suffering of its people and the desecration of sacred sites, is seen not only as a geopolitical struggle, but also as a deeply spiritual crisis. Many classical and contemporary scholars interpret various hadiths and Quranic references as signaling that when the oppression in Palestine becomes unbearable, it is a sign that a major divine shift is imminent. According to numerous hadiths, especially those found in collections like Sunan Abu Dawud, Musnad, Ahmad, and Sahih Muslim, the Holy Land will witness intense tribulation before the final era of justice begins. One widely cited narration tells of a group of believers who will continue to resist oppression in Jerusalem until the hour. They will remain steadfast, and their resilience becomes one of the spiritual signs of the nearing end. These hadiths depict the people of Palestine as standing at the front line of a spiritual war, one not only between nations, but between truth and falsehood. The suffering in Gaza, the repeated desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the international community's inability or unwillingness to act decisively are often seen by Muslims as fulfillments of these prophecies. This oppression isn't just physical, it is psychological, cultural, and even spiritual. The Ummah at large feels a collective wound through what happens in Palestine. The cries of children in refugee camps, the rubble of bombed homes, and the desecration of a land once sanctified by prophets are interpreted as signs that the divine plan is unfolding. As this oppression deepens, Islamic prophecies mention that divine aid will come in unexpected ways. The emergence of Imam Mahdi is one such intervention. While he does not arise from Palestine, the events there serve as a spiritual trigger, like a storm that demands a righteous response. His arrival is marked by an era of truth and the fall of tyrannical powers, which includes the unjust occupation and domination of Muslim lands. In this context, the intensifying conflict over Palestine becomes not just a political tragedy, but a divine alarm bell, ringing across the consciousness of the Muslim world. Islamic prophecies emphasize the sanctity of Al-Aqsa Mosque and its critical role in the final battles between truth and falsehood. Situated in the heart of Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa is not just a historical structure. It is a living symbol of Islamic identity, resistance, and the spiritual link between the early prophets and the final message of Islam. Muslims believe it is the second mosque ever built on earth and the first Qibla, or direction of prayer, before it was changed to the Kaaba in Makkah. It is this deep spiritual connection that places Al-Aqsa at the center of many end-time narrations. According to multiple hadiths, including those found in Sahih Muslim and other authentic collections, the sacred precinct of Al-Aqsa will be a key site of struggle and confrontation in the days leading to the hour. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, foretold that a group from his Ummah would remain steadfast in truth, stationed around Jerusalem, unshaken by opposition, and triumphant over their enemies. This steadfastness is not simply military, it's spiritual, moral, and deeply rooted in divine purpose. The desecration or attempted control of Al-Aqsa is viewed by scholars as a major transgression that provokes divine wrath. Every occupation, restriction on worship, or profanation of this holy site is interpreted by many Muslims not just as an injustice against the community, but as a direct challenge to the sacred. These acts are seen as fulfilling part of the signs that lead to a period of great upheaval followed by divine justice. The narrative suggests that once this injustice reaches its peak, it will be met with an equally powerful divine response. The importance of Al-Aqsa also lies in the fact that it will play a role in the arrival of Imam Mahdi and the eventual descent of Prophet Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him. Many scholars believe that the true liberation of Al-Aqsa can only occur under the leadership of Imam Mahdi, as he restores justice and defeats the forces of tyranny. The mosque, once free, will then resume its rightful place as a center of worship and unity for the believers. Its liberation is not only political, it is deeply spiritual, marking the restoration of a divinely intended order on earth, beginning from one of the holiest places in Islam. The emergence of Imam Mahdi is closely linked with major conflicts in the Middle East, particularly centered around Syria and Palestine, as foretold in authentic Islamic tradition. Islamic eschatology presents a vivid tapestry of events that are destined to unfold before the appearance of Imam Mahdi, and many of these events are concentrated in the region known today as the Middle East. Among the nations mentioned in the Hadith literature, Syria, Sham, and Palestine feature most prominently. These lands are not only historically sacred, but are depicted as the epicenters of upheaval, war, and ultimately divine intervention. Prophetic narrations speak of immense strife, civil wars, foreign invasions, and ideological confusion spreading across these lands before Imam Mahdi's arrival.
When we look at the early Muslims, we don't see a people who merely made dua and waited. We see men and women who bled, who stood firm in the face of torture, hunger, and isolation. The Battle of Badr wasn't won just because the Muslims were oppressed. It was won because they gave everything they had, stood united and cried to Allah after doing everything in their power. Today our Ummah cries for Palestine, but how many of us are changing our lifestyles, cutting off support to the oppressors, or working day and night to build Islamic strength? We expect angels to descend while we live in heedlessness. Dug without action is a form of spiritual laziness. It is as if we are asking Allah to do everything while we do nothing. But Allah has always expected His servants to walk toward Him before He runs toward them. He expects us to rise, to speak truth, to stand firm, to purify ourselves, and to build systems that reflect His guidance. We say we want change, but are unwilling to change our own hearts, our communities, or our priorities. The Muslim world is filled with potential, yet trapped in stagnation because we wait for miracles instead of becoming the miracle. True reliance on Allah includes action. The Prophet Muhammad let Rafiq tie his camel before trusting Allah. He strategized before battles. He made alliances, trained companions, and built a community of strength, trust, and sacrifice. So when we say we want Allah's help for Palestine, we must prove it with action, not just posts, prayers, and protests. We must ask ourselves daily, what are we doing that makes us worthy of divine help? Because the help of Allah is not promised to those who wait. It is granted to those who work. What is happening in Palestine is not evidence that Allah has turned His back on the oppressed, but rather that He is turning the mirror toward us. The suffering of the Palestinian people is not meaningless. It carries a divine message, a painful but necessary wake-up call for the entire Ummah. We often ask why such pain exists, but rarely ask what it is trying to teach us. In truth, the suffering is not a curse. It is a reminder that something within us, something in our collective identity as Muslims, has gone terribly wrong. This constant oppression and humiliation is a call to return to Allah, to reflect deeply on the condition of our faith, our priorities, and our commitment to justice. We are seeing the consequences of decades of neglect, neglecting our religion, neglecting unity, neglecting our duty to stand up for the oppressed, not just with words, but with sustained actions, with policy, with education, with economic and political independence. The repeated assaults on Gaza are not just acts of external aggression. They reflect the internal collapse of our unity and strength. Allah, in His wisdom, allows this suffering to continue not because He is unjust, but because He is exposing what we have become. He is forcing us to confront our weaknesses, our divisions, our laziness, and our disobedience. Throughout Islamic history, every hardship has been an opportunity for renewal. When Muslims strayed, they were tested. When they returned to Allah, victory followed. But that return is not just about salah or fasting. It's about realignment. It's about standing for truth even when it's inconvenient, about cleaning our hearts and our homes, about holding our leaders accountable, about building a generation that knows its deen and its purpose. The pain of Palestine should not only break our hearts, it should shake our souls. It should ignite in us a fire that refuses to be extinguished by distractions and comforts. The images of war are not just there to stir sympathy, they are there to stir transformation. Every destroyed home, every injured child, every funeral under bombardment is a reminder that our Ummah needs revival. The pain is not without reason. It is Allah's way of calling us back, of making us look beyond flags and slogans, and forcing us to rebuild our commitment to His cause with sincerity, sacrifice, and complete submission. Muslims today have forgotten who they are, not just as individuals, but as a global Ummah entrusted with a sacred mission. Allah chose this Ummah to be witnesses over humanity, to uphold justice, truth, and mercy. Yet many of us have reduced Islam to a label instead of a lifestyle. The trials faced by Palestine are not just about occupation and military power. They reflect a much deeper issue: the loss of the Muslim identity. In many parts of the world, Muslims are more passionate about football teams than about the Ummah, more informed about celebrities than about the companions of the Prophet, letter soul, and more invested in personal comfort than in collective responsibility. So, this spiritual confusion has stripped us of the strength and clarity that once made us a force of change. Our identity has been compromised by decades of cultural colonization, secular ideologies, and internal disunity. Instead of looking to the Quran and Sunnah for guidance, we now look to influencers, trends, and what is socially convenient. We speak of Palestine with emotion, but we live lives that contradict the very principles we say we defend. How can we expect Allah's help when our communities are divided by race, tribe, sect, and ego? When we ignore the cries of the oppressed unless they appear in viral videos? When we allow sin and injustice in our own homes and remain silent? Muslim youth are growing up with more access to Western media than to Islamic knowledge, more exposure to pop culture than to the seerah of the Prophet, letter FD. We've allowed the world to shape our priorities, and in doing so, we've lost the moral foundation that once gave us dignity. The mission of this Ummah was never to blend in. It was to lead with truth, even when it was unpopular. But today, too many Muslims are afraid to speak, afraid to stand, and afraid to lose the privileges they've gained in societies that reward silence. This identity crisis is not just affecting us, it's costing lives. Because without a strong and united Ummah, the oppressed have no shield. Palestine is bleeding not only because of bombs, but because the heart of the Muslim world has gone numb. Wait until we reclaim our identity, not just in words but in action. We will remain powerless observers of our own decline. The world cannot respect a people who have forgotten who they are, and divine help is not granted to those who abandon their own mission. The help of Allah is not automatic, it is conditional. This is a principle deeply embedded in the Quran and the legacy of every prophet. The victory of Badr did not come simply because the Muslims were oppressed or because they were right. It came because they met the conditions of divine support. They were united, sincere, obedient, and willing to sacrifice everything for the truth. They followed the command of the Prophet, letter of discipline, and stood firm in the face of overwhelming odds. Today, many Muslims look at the pain in Palestine and cry out for another Badr, another miracle. But we must ask ourselves honestly, do we possess even a fraction of the qualities of the people who stood in Badr?
It is within this environment that Imam Mahdi emerges, not to impose authority, but to answer a call that has been rising from the hearts of believers worldwide. His leadership is accepted not through force, but through recognition, as the people see in him the qualities they had long been yearning for. This global return to faith, resistance against tyranny, and unity in purpose becomes the true foundation for his rise. The downfall of tyrannical regimes in the region is often seen in Islamic prophecies as a domino effect, leading to the collapse of Israel and the global recognition of Imam Mahdi's leadership. In the framework of Islamic eschatology, the rise and fall of regimes are not merely political shifts, but manifestations of divine justice and prophecy. Several hadiths and interpretations from scholars throughout centuries point to a time when oppressive rulers, those who exploit, murder, and betray their people for the sake of worldly power, will begin to fall in rapid succession. This collapse is seen not as isolated events, but as a preordained unraveling of systems built on injustice. According to traditions, when such tyranny begins to break apart, it signals that the world is being prepared for a new, divinely guided order under Imam Mahdi. The idea of tyrannical regimes crumbling one after the other has often been connected with the broader resistance movements that rise from within the Ummah. From corrupt monarchies to puppet governments serving foreign agendas, Islamic eschatology views these entities as temporary structures delaying the implementation of divine justice. When their time ends, the structures of oppression begin to collapse economically, militarily, and socially, causing widespread disillusionment among the people and a thirst for truth and real leadership. The State of Israel, often depicted in Islamic discourse as the last major manifestation of colonial injustice in the Muslim world, is believed to be the culmination of these power structures. Its eventual collapse is described in numerous Islamic interpretations as a pivotal moment. It is not just the end of a political state. It represents the dismantling of an entire global system that supports occupation, injustice, and desecration of sacred lands. The removal of such a regime, according to Islamic tradition, clears the way for the rise of Imam Mahdi. When Imam Mahdi emerges, the world, particularly the Muslim world, will be in a state of chaos, betrayal, and despair. The sequence of failing tyrannies will have created a power vacuum and spiritual hunger. Into this void, Mahdi does not rise by ambition, but by divine decree, and his emergence will be globally recognized not because of propaganda or conquest, but because of his justice, humility, and alignment with long-awaited prophecy. The fall of Israel is therefore not an isolated collapse. It is one of the final pieces that allows the new world under Mahdi's leadership to begin. The end of Israel, as described in Islamic prophecies, is not simply the fall of a political entity. It is the breaking of a global system built on injustice, arrogance, and the betrayal of sacred trust. From the oppression in Palestine to the spiritual battles raging across the Muslim world, every moment of suffering has meaning. Every cry echoes in divine awareness. These are not ordinary times. They are the final chapters before a new beginning. The rise of Imam Mahdi is not the rise of another king or commander. It is the return of divine justice through a leader whose mission is to revive the heart of humanity and lead it back to truth. As tyrannical regimes fall and the world grows weary of deceit, the Ummah will rise, not just in protest, but in purpose. The unity we lost through division will return through faith. The fear we lived under will be replaced by courage rooted in conviction. The dignity we gave away will be reclaimed through sacrifice and sincerity. Al-Aqsa will no longer weep alone. Palestine will not remain under the shadow of occupation forever. The fall of the oppressors is written. To everyone listening, wherever you are, know this. We are living in a time of test, but also in a time of prophecy. You are not powerless. Your awareness, your voice, your prayer, and your actions all matter. History is being written, and you have a role in it. Stand firm, stay awake, and keep your heart close to truth. A day is coming when the oppressed will be honored, the corrupt will fall, and the light of justice will shine from east to west. Thank you for listening with your heart open and your mind engaged. May you be guided by clarity, protected by truth, and strengthened by faith. May your steps be firm, your intentions pure, and your voice a force for justice in these defining times. Good luck on your journey, and may we all be counted among those who rise with truth when the final call comes. Peace be upon you all.